as our best subject that we are always discussing is concerned. Our subject that I'm referring to is biology, which actually talks more about our life as individuals, which gives us more information in a better way in as far as how our body works is concerned. It is of great importance and of great value that I present to you today's discussion in an amicable way, in a better way, in a constructive way that can be able to really help each one of us in having a better understanding of how our body works, in understanding how the different things we do as human beings, in understanding how we behave in a particular manner, in understanding how the activities we engage in may end up affecting our health and at large affecting the bodies that we have as our bodies, which are actually the temple of God. In our today's discussion, in as far as this subject is concerned, we shall be able to constructively look at the way the male reproductive system works, such that at the end of the day, it may affect the process. It may effectively lead to this process called fertilization. On leading to the effectiveness of this process called fertilization, it will be able to facilitate the giving rise of young ones of us as human beings and the giving rise of young ones of other animals found within our environment. Now, we shall first try to ask ourselves, what is the meaning of internal fertilization? Because we had earlier on given a brief explanation of external fertilization, and we said in external fertilization, the eggs from the female reproductive system are fertilized outside the body of the female organism. But under internal fertilization, which is very, very common in reptiles, mammals, and different organisms under class Fs. I'm referring to those organisms found under class Fs, and I'm talking about, in a simpler language, the birds. So what I'm trying to say here is that internal fertilization is common in many species, or in most of the species, under three main classes. But I had told you that biology is very wider in a way that you may realize that not all the organisms under the classes I'm going to mention are able to have this internal fertilization, or we may also have some other organisms from other classes which may still be able to exhibit this type of fertilization. The class I want to mention, which have been actually touched on by so many scientists, are class Mammalia, number 2, class Reptilia, and number 3, class Apes. Class Mammalia consists of mainly a good number of mammals. Class Reptilia will mainly consist of a good number of reptiles. Then class Apes will majorly be able to encompass a good number of birds which are within our environment or surrounding. So to be very, very clear, there are some differences that exist between internal fertilization and external fertilization. The first one, internal fertilization is where the egg or the eggs from the female body are fertilized within the body of that organism, while external fertilization is where the egg or eggs from the female body are fertilized outside the body of the female organism. Number 2, in a female organism, in as far as internal fertilization is concerned, many eggs may not be laid, but in external fertilization, the female may end up laying many eggs, such that when those eggs have been released to the surrounding, there is still a higher probability of some eggs getting fertilized, in as far as some of those eggs may end up being destroyed or being eaten by other animals within that environment. So what am I saying? In internal fertilization, very few eggs may be laid. In external fertilization, the female lays many eggs to increase the chances of fertilization. Why do we have very few eggs under internal fertilization in as far as the laying is concerned in relation to the female organism? It is because when the male deposits sperms in the body of the female organism, the sperms or the male gametes and the eggs, which are now few, or the egg, which is one, are all protected because they are inside the body of the female. So when the sperm cells or the male gametes and the few eggs laid by the female or the egg laid by the female are inside the body of the female, they are well protected in a way that chances of the egg or eggs being fertilized while inside the body of the female are very high. That's why the female may not end up laying many eggs. Something also to note is that when the egg or eggs have been fertilized, in most mammals, in some species of reptiles like chameleons, and in some species of birds, these eggs may remain within the body of the female. When the eggs are within the body of the female, they will be fertilized internally to form what we call a zygote if only one egg has been fertilized, or zygotes if many of them have been fertilized, so that this zygote or zygotes will remain within the body of that organism for a particular period. It is called gestation period, such that at the end of the day, these will actually do what we call the young ones of that organism, which are now going to be what? Given birth to after that gestation period. And gestation period differs depending on the type of organism that we are discussing. So, it is very, very clear now, every organism that has internal fertilization will end up laying very few eggs in as far as the female is concerned, such that when the eggs are fertilized internally or within the body of the female, that increases the chances of fertilization. Hence, in any internal fertilization, in as far as several organisms are concerned, chances of fertilization are very high. And this will now ensure that the offspring or offsprings are also within the body of the female body of the organism that we are talking about, and this actually will give us the young ones of that organism after that gestation period. To take note of, you should understand that when we are talking about fertilization, and to be very specific in as far as mammals are concerned, we have three different types of mammals that we shall discuss in detail today. The first category is a category that will give us mammals always called as monotremes. Monotremes are mammals which are egg laying. What is the spelling of monotremes? M-O-N-O-T-R-E-M-E-S. These are mammals that are egg laying. They lay eggs. These eggs are the ones that hatch into young ones after the gestation period. There are two main types of mammals known which are egg laying. Such mammals are echidna, which is E-C-H-I-D-N-A. Echidna is also referred to as spiny anteater. Apart from echidna, another example of an egg-laying mammal is called dark-billed platypus. Those are the two main known mammals which are egg-laying, found in Australia and some other Western countries. These mammals are said to be oviparous, meaning they lay eggs which actually hatch into young ones of the same kind in as far as that organism is concerned. The second category is the one we refer to as marsupials. MARSUPIALS. These are mammals that when the egg or eggs have been fertilized internally, the zygote will spend part of its gestation life inside a special structure in the body of that female organism called uterus. Then after that, the organism, which is now going to be the offspring or the young one of this organism, will actually end up spending the remaining part of its gestation period outside the body of the organism in a special structure called pouch, which is POUCH, and that one is very, very common in some mammals, and especially in one of them known as kangaroo. The last category of mammals, in as far as internal fertilization is concerned, is the one we refer to as placental mammals. In placental mammals, for example in human beings, when the egg has been fertilized internally inside the body of the female organism, the egg may spend all of its gestation period in a special structure within the body of the female called uterus. After that gestation period, the organism is now given birth to. After the organism has been given birth to, it is given great care. It is given parental care. The young one is fed exclusively on the female's milk. The young one is breastfed. The young one is given milk from the mammary glands of the female. The young one is exclusively fed on breast milk. The young one is exclusively breastfed. After some time is when the young one can start getting introduced to semi-solid food and later on solid food, before that love and care can start decreasing so that the organism can now depend on itself as time goes by. That is what we actually say in as far as placental mammals are concerned. That means when the young one is inside the body of the female, it receives nutrients and other very important substances in as far as the placenta of the mother is concerned, where the exchange of nutrients takes place. That means in placental mammals, exchange of nutrients between the female organism and the child occurs in a structure called the placenta. That's why they are referred to as placental mammals. Now, to continue with our discussion, we are now going to discuss the main ways in which the male and the female organisms are adapted to facilitate the process of fertilization in as far as their reproductive system is concerned. To be able to have a clear understanding of how young ones of mammals and other organisms are able to come into existence, we always have to go back and look at what fertilization is all about. And now, to be able to understand fertilization, we need first to understand what will enable this process of fertilization to take place. And what enables the process of fertilization to take place is actually the male and the female reproductive system. So we shall be in detail in as far as our discussion is concerned in trying to understand how the different parts of the male and the female reproductive system are adapted to perform their functions to facilitate the process of fertilization, so that when the male and the female gametes fuse, they form a single nucleus which can be able to be called a zygote, that can be able to grow and develop by undergoing rapid cell division in a logarithmic manner, so that the young one of that organism is actually able to exist after being given birth to. When we start by looking at the male reproductive system, the most important and the striking part that you're supposed to begin with is the testis. T-E-S-T-I-S or T-E-S-T-E-S in plural. What you're supposed to understand is the testis, when it is developing or when they are developing, they normally originate from the embryonic tissue in the abdomen, so that after growth, after they have developed, they are now able to move downwards and get suspended outside the body of the male organism. The testes normally develop from the embryonic tissue within the abdomen. After developing and being able to mature and function, they are now able to get suspended outside the body of the male reproductive system. They get suspended outside the body, and we shall be able to explain as to why they become suspended outside the body of the male reproductive system. You will understand that when they become suspended outside the body of the male reproductive system, that favors a conducive environment in as far as regulating the temperature within the testis is concerned. Because for you to be able to have the sperm cells being produced and having a higher viability, you are supposed to ensure that the right temperature is actually provided. And sperm cells normally become well produced, mature and able to function under low temperatures. That is why early in the morning, the testis, in as far as the outer part that covers the testis called the scrotum, will contract. So try to look at the scrotum, the outer part of the testis, the epidermis or the skin part of it that covers the testis, that encloses the testis, will always contract early in the morning. When the scrotum contracts or the outer part of the testis contracts, that ensures that the temperatures are regulated in terms of ensuring that the body does not lose excess heat, so that the temperature within the testis is maintained at a particular level to ensure that sperm production is not affected. During the day, at noon, try to look at your testes. They will become suspended, they become dilated, they become over-dilated. They get suspended freely without any form of contraction. They expand. Why is the scrotum getting dilated, getting suspended, getting released? It is to ensure that when it gets released, more blood flows within the region, more blood flows closer to the skin within the scrotum to ensure that the excess heat is released, so that the testis does not end up having a higher temperature, to ensure that the sperms are not destroyed, so that the right temperature is maintained to facilitate sperm production and sperm viability for the purposes of fertilization. Within the testis, we have what we call seminiferous tubules, which are highly coiled to fit in the testis. The seminiferous tubules have actively dividing cells along their line. Along the seminiferous tubules, the cells are actively dividing to ensure that sperm cells are produced accordingly. What you're supposed to note is, when you look at the seminiferous tubules, the cells along the seminiferous tubules are dividing actively. I think you're aware of mitosis and meiosis, and you can be able to understand how male and female gametes can be formed as far as the two processes are concerned. What you need to note is, when the cells undergo rapid cell division, so that many cells are formed, many unproductive and immature sperm cells are formed. These immature and unproductive sperm cells are taken to special cells called Sertoli cells. S-E-R-T-O-L-I. In the Sertoli cells is where we have the sperm cells being able to actually mature and become very productive. That tells you that within the testis, When the cells along the seminiferous tubules have undergone cell division, that is not enough to ensure that the sperm cells are mature. These sperm cells are taken to Sertoli cells within the male reproductive system to ensure that they are now able to become mature, to become productive, and to become viable for the purposes of fertilization. That clearly again tells you that Sertoli cells are very, very important to facilitate sperm maturity and sperm viability for the purposes of fertilization. A student in any part of this country or in any other part of this world, or any teacher who is a biology teacher, should understand that sperm cells just arising when the cells along seminiferous tubules divide is not enough. They are unviable, unproductive, and immature, and hence fertilization cannot take place unless those cells which have undergone cell division along the seminiferous tubules are taken to Sertoli cells for maturity and viability. That is very, very important. Within the seminiferous tubules inside the testes, a student is supposed to understand that we have cells called interstitial cells. INTERSTITIAL. Interstitial cells are there to ensure that the male hormones called androgens are produced, and you know the function of hormones in the body of any organism. Androgens or androgen is a general term used to refer to all male hormones within the male reproductive system. And an example is testosterone. We have even androtestosterone and others. There are so many. These hormones facilitate the process of fertilization, and we shall look at this in detail in our next discussion. So a student or a teacher or any other person who is interested in this very important subject should be able to understand that the interstitial cells within the seminiferous tubules inside the testes will be able to facilitate the production of male hormones, generally referred to as androgens. And I have given you examples of testosterone and others. People are wondering, how do we write the name testosterone? It is TESTOSTERONE. I will repeat. TESTOSTERONE. Testosterone and aldotestosterone and others, as you may want to mention more. So we have produced sperm cells which have matured within the Sertoli cells. We have produced the male hormones, generally referred to as androgens, within the interstitial cells. These things are taken out of the testes, and as they are driven out of the testes, there is a tube that directly gets connected to the testes called epididymis. Epididymis is EPIDYDIMIS. Epididymis. Epididymis is a very long tube which is practically averaged to have a length of 6 meters. The 6 meters of the epididymis is very, very important biologically, in a way that it provides a larger surface area for the temporal storage of sperm cells which have been manufactured inside the testes. So epididymis ensures that sperm cells are temporarily stored as they await to perform their function at a later stage. Just from epididymis, we have what we call the sperm duct or vas deferens. The sperm duct or vas deferens connects the epididymis and the urethra. It is a long tube that actually creates a connection between the epididymis, where the sperm cells are temporarily stored, and the urethra, where we shall have the ejaculation of the sperm cells. Along the sperm duct or vas deferens is where, as the sperm cells are actually moving forward towards the urethra, we shall have the maturity and even more development of those sperm cells, so that they become very specialized to facilitate the process of fertilization. When you reach at that other end, we have a special part before reaching the urethra called seminal vesicle. Seminal vesicle is a very important part of the male reproductive system, which secretes an alkaline fluid. The alkaline fluid or medium is very important in that it ensures that nutrients are added to the sperm cells which are just arriving in the urethra, so that the seminal vesicle producing this alkaline fluid ensures that the spermatozoa or the sperm cells have an adequate supply of nutrients for the purposes of their growth and maturity and specialization and viability, for them to have a longer lifespan and be able to facilitate the process of fertilization. Apart from providing nutrients, in as far as the alkaline fluid from seminal vesicle is concerned, that alkaline medium also contains very important chemical factors that ensure that the sperm cells are also activated so that they are sensitive to the chemicals released by the egg once they will get deposited in the female reproductive system. That is what we call chemotaxis. A student is supposed to understand that once the sperm cell reaches in the uterus, or as the sperm cell is introduced in the female reproductive system, the sperm cell will blindly move as it actually directs itself towards the oviduct. But when the ovary has released the ovum, as that egg moves along the fallopian tube or oviduct, it releases chemicals. Those chemicals are sensed or received by the sperm cell, and that is what directs the sperm cell towards the egg to facilitate the process of fertilization. That should be well understood. It should be very clear to anybody who actually makes this subject the best friend ever. A student is supposed to understand that as you move from the seminal vesicle, you actually move forward and find yourself going to other organs like prostate gland and the corpus gland. Prostate gland and corpus gland are very important. They all produce alkaline fluids. When you look at the corpus gland, it secretes an alkaline fluid that ensures that the urethra is well taken care of in as far as any acidity present is concerned. Because when urine is passing through the urethra, urine is acidic. You know the role of the kidney nephron in removing excess water and excess salts from the body. When we form urine, the urine is acidic. When urine is acidic, what is happening here? As the urine passes through the urethra, which is an erectile intermittent part passing through the penis, you should understand that it leaves the acidity along the urethra. The corpus gland provides or produces that alkaline fluid to be able to neutralize the lining of the urethra, so that when the sperms are passing, they don't die, because sperms cannot survive under acidic conditions. So the urethra is neutralized using the alkaline fluid produced by the corpus gland. To move forward, you have what you call the prostate gland. The prostate gland produces an alkaline fluid also to ensure that the part of the female reproductive system called the vagina, and as you move forward towards the cervix, is also neutralized, because that area is also very acidic. So as the prostate gland produces that alkaline fluid, the fluid neutralizes the acidity of the vagina, such that when the sperms will be deposited, the sperms will not die, they will survive, because the prostate gland has produced an alkaline fluid which has neutralized the acidity of the vagina to ensure that the sperm cells are not killed. As you progress forward, you will also understand that urethra directly meets with the urinary bladder. And the urinary bladder has what we call a urinary duct. Remember, from the kidney, we have what we call the ureter. The ureter will make sure that the urine formed in the kidney nephron can be able to get channeled into what we call the urinary bladder through the ureter. When the urine reaches the urinary bladder, it is temporarily stored. But when someone feels the urge to urinate, the sphincter muscles at the opening of the urinary bladder will relax to reopen the urinary bladder to allow the urine to come out. Sphincter, S-P-H-I-N-C-T-E-R, sphincter muscles. Sphincter muscles are muscles found just closer to the urinary bladder at the opening. Sphincter muscles are also found around the anus. These muscles will facilitate what you call contraction or relaxation when allowing someone to relieve himself or herself. So when the sphincter muscles at the opening of the urinary bladder relax, urine comes out. So from the urinary bladder, as you move downwards, what we call the urinary duct. The urinary ducts will always meet with the urethra in several human beings. So when the urinary duct meets with the urethra, they form what we call vasa efferentia. V-N-S-A, then dash E-F-E-R-E-N-T-I-A, vasa efferentia. Vasa efferentia is a tube that results when the urinary duct meets with the urethra. So they form what we call vasa efferentia. The vasa efferentia is the one that now can be able to actually penetrate through the penis to the outside of the organism. What you're supposed to note is that the urethra has two main functions. That is why it is generally referred to as urinogenital. It actually ensures that ejaculation is well taken care of in terms of releasing sperms into the female reproductive system, and then acts as also a part where urine is actually released from the body. So urinogenital, it actually expels urine outside the body of the male reproductive system and also ensures that it is actually a genital part. It is a genitalia, an organ or a part within the reproductive system that ensures that the sperm cells are able to get out of the body of that male reproductive system and find their way into the female reproductive system. Urinogenital. Urinogenital. That means it is actually an ejaculatory part and also a part that expels urine from the male reproductive system. So someone can ask you, why do you refer to urethra as urinogenital? You will say it can, one, expel urine out of the body of the male reproductive system and at the same time be able to act as an ejaculatory organ to be able to release the sperm cells and deposit them into the female reproductive system. When we go to the penis, we have said the urethra is that part within the penis where urine can pass and the sperms can pass as they find their way to the outside. Within the sperms, we have very important genetic information which is going to be transferred to the offspring when there will be what we call fertilization. A student is supposed to understand that when you look at the sperm cell, you will be able to understand how it effectively works, and that is a topic of another day. But to be just able to understand, you should understand that when you look at the end part of the sperm, we have what we call acrosome. Acrosome has lytic enzymes. The lytic enzymes are the ones that digest the membrane of the egg from the female reproductive system. So when the vitelline membrane that actually forms the outer part of the egg from the female reproductive system is digested, is when the sperm cell can be able to penetrate and enter the egg to facilitate the process of fertilization. And you should remember that once the sperm cell has entered, the vitelline membrane regenerates to ensure that it does not allow any other sperm cell to enter. That is the wonder that has left everybody wondering how God works in a marvelous manner. What you are supposed to understand is that you know when you look at the sperm, you should also understand that it has what we call the mitochondria. The mitochondria are just the organelles within the sperm cell which actually provide site for respiration to provide energy, so that As the sperm cell is swimming, it has enough energy to move towards the fallopian tube to fertilize the egg. A sperm cell is a cell. A cell requires energy. Where does the energy come from? The energy comes from the mitochondria, where respiration has taken place, where the food has been broken down, so that that energy availed is used by that cell to be able to get propelled forward as it moves towards the egg, the fallopian tube. We have also what we call the centriole. Centriole is an organelle only found in animals. The work of the centriole, in fact, that is now a difference you can give between a plant cell and an animal cell. A plant cell does not have centriole. An animal cell has centriole. The main role of centriole in any cell in an animal is to ensure that the rate of cell division is sped up. So the centriole speeds up the rate of cell division, such that when the egg and the sperm have meet, isn't it? When the egg and the sperm meet, the male nucleus and the female nucleus will actually be able to fuse to form a single nucleus called zygote. That zygote, having the centriole, will be able to divide rapidly due to what we call the centriole. 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 The centriole. The centriole in a sperm cell ensures that the rate of cell division of that cell which has been formed can be able to be higher to form a new offspring. We have the tail at the end part, which ensures that the sperm cell is propelled forward. I think you can able to understand how a fish looks like. When the tail fin, isn't it? Or the caudal fin does like this. That's the way in which a sperm can also be able to propel itself forward when the tail does or has this movement. That movement of the tail of the sperm will always propel the sperm forward. That is very clear to everybody. Inside the head of the sperm cell, we have what we call the nucleus. The nucleus has the genetic information, and we are saying in any male or female gamete of any organism, the information contained there is always half the information the organism is going to have at the end of the day. That means, for example, in a human being, the sperm cell contains 23 chromosomes while the egg contains 23 chromosomes. When they come together, they give 46 chromosomes to the offspring. That is the wonder of the living God. Moving forward, within the penis, we have blood vessels, we have muscles, we have the spongy tissue. So when I see a woman who is very beautiful, the information in as far as the image of that woman is formed on my retina, the information is carried by the optic nerve to the brain. The brain interprets and actually tells me that there is pleasure or there's something that gives happiness to any man in this world or the male organism. With that, the brain sends information in form of impulses to the heart to divert the flow of blood towards the hind limbs. And if you can be able to understand this very well, the male reproductive system is actually between the hind limbs. So when the brain directs the heart to divert the blood so that the blood can flow now towards the hind limbs in large amount, that means when the blood flows and reaches the penis, more blood flows into the tissues of the penis, and when the tissues become filled, because we have blood vessels flowing through the penis, that means when the blood flows through those penis, the tissues within that penis get filled, and when they get filled, the penis gets erected, and that is how wonders will never end. I don't want to mention anything more than that. Something to add on that, you should understand that the end part of the penis is called foreskin or prepuce. That ensures that the end part of the penis called glans penis is protected. So the prepuce or the foreskin protects the end part of the penis called glans penis. G-L-A-N-S, glans penis. Glans penis is the end part of the penis. So it becomes protected so that nothing happens to that delicate part, which now can be able to penetrate the vagina and be able to deposit the sperm cells to allow room for fertilization. Thank you so much for having taken your time. These are the most common questions that will come in your examination. You might be told one day, you might get this question somewhere where a person may require that You briefly explain how the male reproductive system is adapted to ensure that fertilization takes place in an effective way. Please, students, always have more sources in as far as reading is concerned. Get more information from the internet. Get more information from science books. Have an interaction with people who are teaching this subject. Have a discussion with your fellow colleagues in school. With this, you actually become a well-rounded person in as far as this area is concerned. Just not necessarily for the sake of the examination, but for the purposes of your future life, in as far as you being a father or a mother is concerned. Thank you for your listening. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening, and may God bless you so much. Let's meet in our next video. As always, your online tutor, Oscar Ngatia. God bless you so much.